What if I told you one of the biggest pop bands in the world destroyed their entire reputation in exactly zero point 0.5 seconds? They had the money, they had the models, and they had the hairspray, but they didn't have a single monitor check before stepping out in front of 1 billion people. Here's how A View to a Kill became A View to a Career Funeral. By the summer of 1985, Duran Duran wasn't really a band. They were a corporation that sold cheekbones and choruses. They were the Fab Five, the absolute darlings of MTV, and they were rolling in so much cash they probably used it as insulation in their houses. But inside the machine, the gears were grinding metal on metal. They hated each other. It wasn't just a little bit of friction. It was the kind of deep, simmering resentment that comes from spending 5 years trapped in a tour bus, smelling each other's socks and egos. They had split into factions. You had the Taylor on one side wanting to rock out and maybe punch something. Then you had Simon Le Bon and Nick Rhodes, the artsy ones who cared more about the texture of their eyeliner than the guitar riffs. And these guys hadn't actually played a show together in months, not a single gig. They were on a break that felt a lot like a breakup. And then Bob Geldof calls. He's putting together this massive thing called Live Aid. It's for charity. It's for Africa. It is to save the world. You can't say no to Bob Geldof. If you say no to Bob Geldof, you look like a monster or a dumbass. So Duran Duran, the band that cannot stand to be in the same room, agrees to reunite for one day only. They agreed to play the Philly leg of the concert at JFK Stadium. Now, a normal band, a band that cared about their craft, or at least cared about not looking like idiots, would have actually rehearsed. They'd book a studio, they'd run the set list until their fingers bled, they would make sure that those harmonies were damn tight. But Duran Duran did not do that. They were too cool to practice. They figured they could just walk out there, wave at the chicks in the front row, play the hits, and walk off as heroes. They had that specific kind of arrogance that only exists in guys who have been told yes by everybody on their payroll for half a decade. And they didn't meet up to jam, didn't work on the arrangements. They all showed up in Philadelphia separately. Vibe backstage was pretty whacked. It was ice cold. They were treating the biggest concert in the history of mankind like it was a dentist appointment they just wanted to get over with. They were tired, burnt out, and a bit on the chemically altered side as well. It was the 80s after all. Nobody was drinking herbal tea. The scene in Philadelphia was a nightmare. It was hot, not just warm. It was July in Philly, 95 degrees with humidity that stuck your shirt to your back like wet plastic. The backstage area was a total zoo. You had Mick Jagger strutting around, Hall & Oates, Bob Dylan lost, not even knowing where he was at. You had heavy hitters. And then you had Duran Duran looking like they just rolled out of a yacht club, wearing long coats and layers of designer gear that made absolutely no sense for the weather. They're sweating through their makeup before they even touched an instrument. So let's talk about the technical situation at Live Aid, because this is where the disaster really starts to bake in. This wasn't a modern concert. Today you have in-ear monitors, digital mixing boards, team of dudes with iPads making sure every damn frequency is perfect. In 1985, you had giant wooden wedges on the floor and a bunch of stressed out sound guys plugging cables into things and hoping they didn't explode. And the stage at JFK Stadium was this rotating turntable. While one band was playing, the next band was sitting up on the back side of the circle. When the first band finished, the stage would just spin around and the next band would be facing the crowd ready to go. This meant there was zero time for a sound check. None. You could not test your microphone, could not check your monitor levels. You plugged in and you prayed to the rock gods and started playing when that damn red light came on. And for a tight, road-hardened band like Queen, this was not a problem. Those dudes were machines. But for Duran Duran, who hadn't played together in ages anyway, and relied so heavily on studio magic and synthesizers, this was like a death sentence. They're standing on the dark side of the turntable. The roar of the crowd's coming from the other side. Deafening, ocean-like sound. 100,000 people screaming. And that's just the people in the stadium. There's another 1.5 billion who are watching on TV. That's a billion with a B, folks. How the entire planet is watching this thing. Simon Le Bon is standing there in his pants and coat, probably wondering if he even remembers the lyrics. The stage spins. Daylight hits them and that wall of noise hits them. And immediately they know something is wrong. Sound on stage is just pure garbage. It's a wash of mud. The drums are echoing off the back of the stadium. The guitars are thin. And the worst part is the monitors. They could barely hear themselves. Simon Le Bon is a frontman who relies on hearing that pitch. He's not a classically trained opera singer. He's a pop singer. He needs to hear that key. But the monitors are just spitting static and feedback at him, and he's flying blind. You can hear the squeals all throughout it, flying deaf. So they kick into the set, and they start with A View to a Kill. Now, A View to a Kill was the #1 song in America at that exact moment. It was actually friggin' huge. It was the reason that they were closing out the Philly leg before the heavy hitters came on. This was supposed to be a victory lap. The band is sloppy, you can hear it. The timing is off. Roger Taylor on drums trying to hold it together. John Taylor on bass is rushing, probably because he just wants to get off the stage and find a drink. Dude could slap the hell out of that instrument, though. Andy Taylor's cranking his guitar to drown out the confusion, but they're getting through it. The crowd is cheering because, hey, it's Duran Duran. They're pretty. They're famous. It's fine. It's passable. So the song's going. It's dramatic. It's got those big orchestral stabs, that really driving bass line. It's a James Bond theme, for crying out loud. It requires a certain amount of swagger. Simon Le Bon, he's doing his job. He's posing, doing the high kicks, working those cameras like a pro. He knows that 1.5 billion people are staring at him. And he's thinking, I'm crushing this. I'm friggin' doing it. The song builds, and it gets to that bridge. Tension is ramping up. Simon's sweating bullets. Coat was a terrible choice. He's dehydrated. He's running on pure adrenaline and ego. And then comes that final chorus, the big climax. Dance into the fire. The fatal kiss is all we need. Simon goes for it. He winds up, rears back, takes that breath, pushes from the diaphragm, and aims to that high note. And he misses. Not just by a little bit. He doesn't just go a little sharp or a little flat. His voice completely abandons him. It cracks and splinters. Sounds like a prepubescent teenager going through changes in the middle of a choir solo. A turkey falling off a building. Somebody tripping and accidentally stepping on a dog's ball sack. It's a falsetto squeak that defies the laws of acoustics. It was horrifying. That kind of sound that makes your own throat hurt just hearing it. And it cut through the mix like a knife, because the monitors were so damn bad, Simon had to overcompensate. He was just pushing too hard. He strained. And his vocal cords were like, nope, we're out of here. And on stage, in the roar of the stadium, didn't really sound that bad to them, but he knew that he messed up. You could tell by that look on his face. You just look at the thumbnail of this video and you could see it. That was right after that note. People in the stadium, some people picked up on it, but on that TV broadcast, it was crystal clear. It was isolated, louder than the band. 1.5 billion people heard Simon Le Bon sound like he'd just been kicked in the groin. Camera zoomed right in on his face when it happened. You could see that strain, veins about to pop out of his neck. He was giving it 110%, and the result was 100% failure. Wasn't just a bad note, it was a symbol. The moment the 80s gloss cracked, Duran Duran was supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to be these untouchable pop gods. And here's their leader sounding like a drunk guy at a karaoke night. Stripped away the mystique instantly. The rest of the band they played on. What else could they do? They had their heads down, focused on their instruments. Might not have even realized just how intensely bad it was in the moment because the stage sound was just such a mess. Stage sound was such a mess, as is my speech. But the audience knew. The people at home knew. Simon kept going. He finished the song, did his poses, tried to sell the rest of it, but the damage was done. That note hung in the air. It was recorded on tape, beamed to satellites, immortalized instantly. You folks also have to remember this was well before the Janet Jackson boob incident, so they didn't even have a way to be able to maybe save his ass and just cut it short with some kind of delay. It just wasn't happening. So the song ends, the band takes their bows, waves to the crowd, walk off the stage, down the stairs, back into the darkness of the backstage area. And the adrenaline started to wear off immediately. The reality of the situation set in. As they walked back to their dressing rooms, well, really trailers or whatever hellhole they were assigned to in that stadium, the silence between them was heavy. It wasn't the silence of a job well done, it was the silence of, we need to get the hell out of here now. Simon Le Bon knew. Deep down he knew. You always know when you whiff a note that bad. It haunts you. Pretty much wanted to find a hole in the ground, just live in it for the next decade. Remember, this is the 80s, folks, but things like that were actually outrageous. And the media reaction wasn't instant because there was no Twitter back then. But the word of mouth traveled fast. People were talking. Oh my God, did you hear that? Wow. The press reviews the next day were not kind. They focused on the energy event, sure, but that note became the footnote of the entire performance, the tipping point. The band was already fractured. They were sick of each other. But that performance sealed the deal. to prove that they could not just wing it anymore. The magic was gone. The effortless cool was gone. They're just five tired dudes who had embarrassed themselves in front of the entire human race. They didn't have a big band meeting where they screamed at each other, didn't throw chairs, they just drifted, went their separate ways. Duran Duran, as the world knew it, effectively ceased to exist that afternoon. So they walked out of JFK Stadium, got into their separate limos, drove away from the wreckage, and they left that note behind, floating in the humid Philly air, a permanent reminder that even the biggest gods of the 80s could bleed. Smack that like button. Smack the subscribe button. Oh, and hit that hype button too, if you don't mind. Join the family. To my subscribers, you freaking rock. To my patrons, who watch all the crazy stuff I cannot put on here, I'm uploading every weekend there, you freaking rock. Thank you all for watching.